Apparently, a purple alternate universe version of the Enterprise crossed into our reality while battling some evil clones of Tasha Yar.
Well, friends, after a slight Thanksgiving weekend break, we're back with another episode of Star Trek Lower Decks. Somehow we're already up to episode 7 of the 5th and final season. It's otherwise entitled Fully Dilated. Spoilers do lie ahead. If those aren't for you, take this as your last warning. Otherwise, on with the show. Alright, so a couple of thoughts just right up top here. First, way to go ahead and make a mockery of my very last video, Lower Decks. But Geordi and Data would have been awesome. The engineering bromance of those guys and maybe interacting with Rutherford and Tendi. I spent all of that time going through musings about how Lower Decks never got the chance to include characters like Geordi and Data, only to throw this episode up about, several hours after that video went up. First Prodigy, now this. I don't know how Paramount can recover from all of this bad press. Second thought has to do with that title, Fully Dilated. Here we were pretty much anticipating a double meaning, dilation in the form of D'Erica's baby being born, something along those lines, as well as the double meaning of time dilation or a spatial interdimensional rift becoming fully open, something along those lines. So sort of right, but it does feel like there was a bit of a missed opportunity to, or a missed trick, I guess you could say, to cram both of those plots under the same title. Now, that being said, I don't know if it would have made for as successful of an episode, so I'm kind of glad they didn't actually go down that road. After a season that's been good, but fairly middle of the road as far as episodes go, this was definitely something a bit more next level, and that's absolutely appreciated at this point. I certainly think the season would have benefited from placing this episode a bit earlier in the run, maybe throw it at us for episode 5 right there in the middle ground. But now that it's started, it really does feel like the momentum has started piling up for what will hopefully be a very stellar end of the season, and quite frankly, a fantastic end of the series if it really is the end. The real plot of this story takes place on one of those funky, temporally displaced worlds similar to, the planet from Blink of an Eye in Voyager, or the one from Mad Idolatry in the Orville. I could spend just about all day going over every single way this episode references or repurposes the stuck in the past, or stuck on a pre-warp world trope from Trek, but there's really no need for that. If an episode has that plot, it was called upon in some manner here. Obviously, one of the most notable examples is Time's Arrow from TNG, as this directly includes the disembodied, if that's the correct word to use here, head of...
I'm Lieutenant Commander Data.
Yes, sirree! Brent Spiner returns to voice what may very well be his 472nd character in all of Star Trek, as this is a slightly more purple version of the Lieutenant Commander we have come to know from the Prime line. Speaking of which, I guess the purple universe didn't get shoved off of TV into the world of movies, since their Big D and Data are still alive and kicking. It does lead one to wonder, and while we're on that train of thought, why did the purple D leave Data behind in the first place? Is his name not in the main credits in their universe? I understand that they thought that the shuttle crashed and that he was most likely destroyed along with it, but that doesn't really seem like the move they would have made. No extensive search for him, no holding out hope for a wacky last-minute plan by Geordi or Barclay. I wouldn't say it actively took away from the story for me. I just would have liked a slightly more clear bit of dialogue to explain this aspect, although I do understand that they needed to keep it all a mystery until our girl trippers could make the big reveal. Secondly, we've seen Prime Directive and temporal Prime Directive stories played with a million times in this franchise, including in this very episode, but is there no Dimensional Integrity Commission or procedure or something like that? Now don't get me wrong, I'm not blaming this episode or Lower Decks in general for anything at all. It just seems like when it comes to primitive societies or other timelines, you need to tidy everything up. But if it's an alternate dimension, let that litter fly. Mirror Universe, trash that thing. Lose a super advanced android in a parallel universe who doesn't have their own anymore? Sounds great to Picard. For all I know, that's actually the point of the season. Maybe that's why all of the Harry's Kim show up later on. Maybe they're going to establish a dimensional prime directive all over that alternate universe pad Boimler took with him. Oh, and on the subject of Boimler, am I the only one who felt very disappointed that we spent the entire episode dealing with an alternate universe populated by an overabundance of the color purple and his hair was never even addressed in passing. It's just way too much of a missed opportunity for me to let that fall by the wayside. And speaking of other things you shouldn't let fall by the wayside, why not become a member of the channel like these lovely folks? Violet shading not required.
Like and subscribe. Like and subscribe. Like and subscribe.
That is quite impressive. Let us get to work.
Moving along to a slightly warmer subject, let's talk about Orange. I was a big fan of the Dilmarians, especially after feeling that the spheres and the cubes from last episode were very lackluster. I found it pretty refreshing to have a reference to a classic Trek species, while also adding a bit of a new spin. Having an Andorianoid species was really a cool touch in my opinion, especially one with the benefit of animation allowing them to be more fully realized than when TNG mostly used either proto-humans or proto-Vulcans or something like that. I also found it to be a pretty beneficial touch to show our three main characters, the ones who Dilmarize themselves, to have different shades of skin tone in that same orange complexion. The B-plot, I guess you could call it, of Boimler and Rutherford was just short enough to not become excessively annoying. Relying too heavily on them trying to clean off the transporter from their goopy mistake could have really overstayed its welcome very quickly, so cutting back to it a couple of times for just quick little increments was definitely the right play there. And how about those beards? Looks like Rutherford took the advice from last episode, and now he's starting to try to act unlike himself too. The best parts of the episode were definitely Tendi and Data's relationship and interplay, at least to me. I think they had enough going on with everything else, and all the other stories didn't really have to do all that much heavy lifting to get us to the end of the episode feeling like we had a rich and a full story. Now counter that with last week's episode, which felt like a limp to the finish line with almost nothing of consequence along the way. And I'm sorry, Ollie, I still love you, that's just how I feel. The weakest side story might have to be that Mariner jail arc. I don't think it was a bad story, not by a long shot, and it did provide a couple of good gags and references, but I might have preferred a story that actually kept our trio of Lady Deckers together for more of the story. And it might just be because of the my apprehensiveness at the quickly approaching end of the series, but with so little time left to spend with these characters in general, I kind of want to see them spending more of it together instead of the mandatory splitting up. Again, I still think this was easily the best episode of the season, so anything I toss out as possible changes could very easily destroy the balance of something I think worked quite well just the way it stands. So, with references to the increased rift ceiling this episode, it looks like we are finally going to spend time on that story. I don't really know if we can even call it a season arc anymore, with just how little it has been dealt with in the season up until now. I'm definitely still quite excited to see exactly where we're going. It doesn't seem like we have enough clues to figure it out yet, but if you have any thoughts or theories or anything on that subject, please let me know down below, or you can come on over to Best of Trek, Worst of Trek, Mondays at 8 p.m. Eastern to discuss the latest news and episodes in the world of Star Trek, and to tell us all about why you think it's 100%, without a doubt, all Groppler Zorn behind everything. That's all for this one. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, join, and do all those YouTube things. But until next time...
Data, can you chew off my bindings?
That is outside of my knowledge base, but I have seen Lieutenant Worf do this.
You can both suck my ridges.
Oh, get a sense of humor, Rocky Dennis.